Go.
Good morning, everyone, and very welcome to this workshop on FSPs and managing representatives. We are going to be discussing FSPs both in terms of their interaction with natural person representatives as well as with juristic representatives. We hope that you will find this session very interesting and informative. Just a couple of practical things before we start with the content. As you can see, we are still admitting people. It's wonderful to see so many people interested in the session. We are recording the session. We will be hosting the recording on the FSCA YouTube channel. Once we host the recording on the FSCA YouTube channel, you will also have a link to register, and you will then, from that registration link, be able to access the assessment. So we have accredited this workshop for CPD purposes, and you will be able to obtain 3 CPD points for attending the workshop, whether it's the live workshop or the recorded version on YouTube. Once you've completed the assessment, the requirement to obtain the CPD certificate is to successfully complete the assessment. We will be sending a separate communication notice with the links to both workshops, the one that we had on Monday on the amendments to the General Code, as well as this one today on representatives. We will send you one communication link with the links to both of those workshops on the YouTube channel, and that will then be linked to the assessments as well. The FPI, who accredited us for the CPD purposes, have changed their rules, and attendance is not sufficient anymore for obtaining your CPD recognition. You must actually complete an assessment. We've created a 10-question assessment for each of these links, and they will, as I say, be available linked to the webinars. We will also be hosting the slideshows that we used in the 2 workshops. And this will all be on the communication page of the FSCA website. But as I said, we will send out a communication, we will send out the links. You will be able to access the information from there, because we get a lot of questions around assessments and presentations and how can you access that. So for those of you who've already completed your CPD hours for this CPD cycle, well done and congratulations. However, you have the option of then only completing your assessment for these workshops once the new cycle starts. And then you can use the CPD points for these 2 workshops for your new CPD cycle as well. So the YouTube videos and the assessments will be available for 12 months, starting in April 2023 until end of March 2024. So you can then access these assessments at any stage that you need to either watch the video again or to obtain the assessment. If you make a mistake on the assessment, you'll be able to redo it, and you will be able to look at the slides, and you'll also be able to watch the video again just to refresh your memory. So we hope that you find this useful from a variety of perspectives. We have 3 speakers for you in today's session. We are all linked to the Conduct of Business Supervision Division at the FSCA. It is myself, Charene Nortier, and I am joined by my colleagues, Thabang Mashile, who you can also see on the screen, and then Fortune Moreku. So, and then Fortune is as well. So you can see the 3 of us. Thabang is going to start off the discussion for us. What we will have is, after each presenter has finished their section, we will stop for a question and answer session. So we won't take questions while the presenter is busy, but we will take the questions after the presenter has done their section. And then we will give you a leg stretch after each presenter. So you will have 2 leg stretch breaks, and you will have 3 question and answer sessions for today's workshop. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to Thabang. Thabang, thank you very much for joining us this morning, and I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. All the best.
Thank you, Charene. Am I audible that side, Charene?
Yes, you are. You can go ahead.
Thanks, Charene. Thank you, colleagues and stakeholders, for attending this session. I'm Thabang Mashile, as Charene has said, from the COB division. So today's session is about the roles and responsibilities of an FSP, its reps, and management of the relationship from the fit and proper requirements. It is also important to note the changes that were made in Board Notice 706 and 707 of 2020, which relates to the amendment of the General Code of Conduct for authorized FSPs and reps, and respectively amendments of the determination of the fit and proper requirements. It is also important to note FAIS Notice 86 of 2018, which deals with exemption of services under supervision. My colleague Fortune will deal with this section later. So we can begin our conversation. I think it is important to refer to the definition of a rep as indicated in the Act, in the FAIS Act. By extension, a JR is a company in terms of the Companies Act, appointed as a representative of an FSP to render financial services on behalf of a registered and authorized FSP. The Act defines a rep as any person who renders financial services to a client on behalf of a provider which is now licensed, by virtue of employment contract with the provider, or the second part is for the JRs by virtue of a mandate from the provider to conduct our financial services. And there are exclusions when you determine who is a rep. So the exclusions are that any person who provides clerical, technical, administrative, legal, accounting, or related services, that person is not regarded as a rep. Only if the services rendered by this person does not require any judgment, does not lead a client towards a financial product transaction, or this person is only giving factual information to the client. So in that case, you are excluded to be regarded as a rep. If you give factual information, you don't lead a client to a transaction, and then you don't provide your judgment. We move over to, we have two FSPs arrangement. Just put on my laser here. The typical FSP, you will have an FSP which is authorized. It must appoint a key individual, and then it will also have reps who are going to render financial services or interact with clients. As an FSP, you are required to have at least one key individual to oversee the activities of an FSP and the reps. And depending on the size of the FSP, you can appoint more key individuals to ensure operational ability of the FSP. If you've got more reps, you can always, if you feel that you need more key individuals, you can put them on to assist the FSP to render financial services. The second part of the setup is we find an FSP that is authorized. They will appoint a juristic representative. This is normally a company that will provide the service for the FSP. So for every JR that you appoint, you must have a key individual. And the reps linked to that JR must also be appointed under the license of the FSP. It is not permissible to have a JR appointed under an FSP and the person or the home body behind the JR who's rendering financial services is not appointed on the license of the FSP. The relationship is in a way that whoever's appointed at the JR level is representing the FSP. So in any way, there's no person who can render financial services if they're not appointed by an authorized financial services provider. There must be that appointment at all times for you to render financial services. Responsibilities that put on responsibilities that are put on FSPs. It is the responsibility of an FSP to provide an environment conducive to rendering of financial services at all times. The FSP must have policies and procedures to run the business effectively. You must have policies like your risk, financial, business continuity plan, and such like policies to enable the FSP to run effectively. The FSP must have a fixed business address, telephone system. You must have telephone systems. You must have storage to save all your communications with your clients and your policies that you use in the business as well. And then you must have enough human capital to run the business. That is your KI. You must have reps, qualified KIs to oversee the services of the FSP. And then further, an FSP must conduct due diligence and verification before you can appoint a representative. It is the responsibility of the FSP to ensure that checks and balances are done when you appoint a person as a rep. The provider must keep records during the rendering of financial services, which will include the competency register as well. So it is the responsibility of an FSP to keep those records. The provider must ensure competence of staff members. You must identify and schedule training for development of your staff members. And then the provider must have resources to provide supervision of staff members. Whenever you have a person under supervision, you must avail a person who is qualified to assist that person to render services under supervision. And then the FSP must also have oversight over the rendering of financial services. Section 10 of the fit and proper requirements talks about honesty and integrity. The Act requires everyone in the financial services industry to act honestly with integrity and maintain professional conduct. If there's any change in the good standing of a person, that information must be shared. It's either from the key individual or from the rep. The KI must disclose to the authority. And then for the rep must disclose their position to the FSP. And then on that disclosure, the FSP must decide on the materiality of the information from the FSP, whether it's material related to the services that are rendered. For example, if I, Thabang Mashile, I'm caught one day on the highway doing 180 kilometers per hour going to work on the highway, and then there's a case against me, the police will arrest me, and then on Monday I report late to the office. And then when Charene asks where I was in the morning, I have to tell him honestly to say that I'm from the court. I was arrested over the weekend for doing 180 kilometers per hour on the highway. And then that information will assist the person that I'm reporting to determine the materiality of the facts. Another example is forging signatures to write new business. It is, a matter of interpretation or putting value on the facts. So if I'm a rep of one FSP, then I forge signatures to write new business. That conduct in itself, it's material to what I'm doing as an FSP. So the key individual must decide the appropriate steps for that conduct. But I think for the other one where I was caught doing 180, it is immaterial for the services that I'm rendering in the financial services industry. So all the information is important to be disclosed. Then judgment can be put on facts. Moving over, the representative must disclose, like I said, to the FSP if there are any changes. Even if you are, new, when you are new in the financial services, you disclose to the FSP that is going to appoint you what is your situation. And then when you are appointed already in the financial services industry, if anything changes in your personal capacity, you must report that to the relevant person. And then obviously, when the KI reports information to the regulator, we will decide on the materiality of that information. Or if the rep reports to the FSP, then the key individual or the FSP will decide on the materiality of that information. Clear guidance is on section 10 of chapter 2 in the fit and proper guidance on how to deal with such declarations or disclosures. Moving over to competence, once you enter the industry, one is required to maintain and remain competent. A provider or a rep must have adequate and relevant knowledge and skills in respect of financial services. So it is the responsibility again of the provider to ensure that internal processes are there to aid the staff member to comply with the requirements. It's not up to the employee to decide when to attend, training and, upskill themselves. The FSP has the responsibility to come up with plans and training programs to assist the employees. And then one of the requirements to enter the financial services is to have a recognized or relevant qualification. This is once you have a qualification to enter the financial services industry, you are good to go. You don't have to write again for another qualification. And then coming to experience, if you are new in the industry, you are given time to render financial services under supervision to get the experience. But if you're already experienced rep or financial services provider, then you can render financial services. Another requirement is your regulatory examinations. RE5 is for reps. So this one is once off again. You write this one once and you're done with it. You don't have to rewrite whenever you move around FSPs or change products. If you decide to add new products to your license, you don't have to write the RE5 again. You do it only once and you're done with it. And then coming to class of business is also once off. You must attend the class of business training before you can render any financial services. And then the next one is product specific. An FSP or a rep must attend product specific training before they can render financial services, which is now, this one is continuous, unlike the other one where we do it once, because you only learn the basics of, say, long-term insurance or investment or any other product that you're authorized for. So for product specific training, it's continuous. You must do this before you render any financial services. The last one is continuous professional development, CPD. This one is also continuous. Every year, I think we run from May to June, if I'm not mistaken. So within that cycle, you must complete the required CPD points. Sorry. And one thing to mention here is when you do more than what you are required to do in one cycle, you can't carry over the other points to the next cycle. Going into details on qualifications, the authority has a list of recognized qualifications on our website. We are sharing a link here. If you are not sure whether your qualification is in line with the recognized qualifications that we have on our website, you can always contact the FSCA. Then we'll assist. And another thing, if you don't have a qualification like newcomers into the industry, you are given that time again. I think it's 6 years that you can work under supervision while you're getting while you're getting your qualification. So that one you are allowed to do under supervision. And then if you have a qualification that is not recognized by the authority, you can apply to the authority for recognition, but there's a criteria to that. For you to apply, you need to, your qualification must meet the 3 criteria. Now, at least your qualification must have 3 relevant subjects as per Board Notice 194 of 2017. We've listed subjects and qualifications on our website. You can always check. And second criteria is from the 3 relevant subjects that you had, 1 must be in your final year. And then again, the scope of the qualification that you're doing must be qualitatively and quantitatively relevant to the role that you will play in the financial services industry. For reps, there's a scope for that. For key individual, there's a scope for that. So you must make sure that your qualification is relevant in terms of what you do as a professional. Moving over to experience, 1 must have relevant experience to render financial services. If you don't have experience, 1 can obtain relevant experience under supervision depending on the level of authorization and appointment. Some you need 6 weeks to get the relevant experience. Some it takes longer, years and months to get the relevant experience while you service under supervision. And then in that, to enable that person to get a proper experience, the FSP must avail a qualified KI or rep to act as a supervisor with a full program to assist the supervisee to meet the criteria. And the relationship of the two must be governed by a supervision agreement. There must be always a supervision agreement in place, highlighting what key areas must be addressed or monitored. Moving over to class of business training, like I said, this training will give you just fundamental product knowledge on the class of business. Like if you do commercial lines, it will tell you what commercial properties can do and not do. Personal lines, same. And then long-term insurance, what you can do with the long-term insurance policy and what you can do with long-term. The training is once off, like I said. And then this one, the training is once off because the principle doesn't change. An insurance or a commercial insurance policy is a commercial insurance policy. And then class of business continuation, one must attend your class of business training and product training before they can render financial services. FSP or rep must be trained and assessed by an accredited training provider. For you to have a recognized training or qualification, you must register with an accredited training provider. And then again, the responsibilities on the FSP to keep records of the training and the register. And then the register should be updated within 15 days after every training. The FSP is required to retain records for at least 5 years. And then moving over to product-specific training. One must complete product-specific training before they can render any financial services. I've said that before. You cannot go under supervision to have a product-specific training. When you are appointed, and you don't have this training, you can't go out to render financial services. You must sit and do the training before you can go out, even if you're under supervision. But you can't be under supervision and then delay this training. And then, like we said, product-specific training refers to the specific product. In this case, if you are selling ABSA policies, you must get training on those products. If you're selling old mutual, you must have training, to understand those products. And then this training again is continuous. Like I said, if there's any amendments or changes to the policy, you must now go back again to do a training. And then, like we said, in terms of records, the FSP must keep records of this training for at least 5 years. And then it is the responsibility again of the FSP when required to provide confirmation of the training. They must be able to supply that information to either the product supplier or the authority or the rep. Whenever they leave the employee of the FSP, the FSP is required to, if asked to do that, they can supply the records to the rep. Touching again on record keeping in terms of Section 30, the FSP is required to keep the competence register. The register must be updated within 15 days of training. Retain all the records for at least 5 years. Like I said, provide proof of training to product suppliers. Whenever asked by the KI, they can always provide that information to the KI or the rep. It's not the property of the FSP, but the FSP's got the responsibility to share that information that were kept by them to the KIs and the reps. Going to CPD points or training, it is important to note that the CPD cycle, which is 1 June to 31 May. CPD training must be relevant to the role and function of the provider. CPD hours must contribute to the knowledge, skill, and expertise of the provider. It is not about merely collecting CPD points. You don't do CPD points for the fun of it. CPD training must assist to address any gaps in the knowledge of the staff members. So that is the whole intention of doing a CPD training or hours. It must bear fruits. And my final slide is on how you calculate CPD hours for a person who has been absent from work for some time. So in this case, a rep is required to do 12 hours in the cycle, but this person has been away for 5 months from work. And how to determine the hours required for the I think 7 months that he has worked is you take the 12 hours that you are supposed to do, you divide by 12, which is now 12 months, and you multiply by the difference. You take the 12 months minus the months that you was absent from work, you will get 7. So whatever you 12 divided by 12, you will get 1. You multiply that by 7, then you'll get your prorated CPD hours required for that person. I think the intention here is not to burden the providers with CPD hours that you must do, even if you are away from work. So it's taken, you can be away from work for relevant or personal reasons, then the CPD cycle will also favor or cater for that absenteeism. I think that is the end of my my slide. So that is my story for the day, and thank you. Charene, you
Thank you
can
very
take over.
much, Thabang. So we are going to be opening the floor to questions now. And Thabang, I see you getting lots of thumbs up and hands up. So that's fantastic. We are going to start allowing microphone access. So Johan Olivier, you can go ahead and ask your question, and then Nadia can ask her question.
Sorry, Charene, can you hear me?
Yes, Johan, you can.
Okay, yes,
go ahead.
I've actually got 2 questions. The first one relates to product-specific training. Now, I understand that the FSP and the KIs probably more likely are responsible for ensuring that representatives that market specific products are properly accredited with the insurance companies that they sell their products of. The problem that we have practically in the industry is that not all of your insurers, and I don't want to name and shame some of them here, not all of them provide the required infrastructure to do product-specific training as per the requirements. They can provide you with the training and all that kind of thing, but there needs to be an assessment, a proven assessment, in other words, questions and answers, before it can be recognized as product-specific training. So the responsibility is now placed squarely on the FSP, without the support of an insurer that actually provides the facility. So there's a gap in that space. The KIs are not necessarily always in the best position to facilitate that training or to draft an assessment questionnaire that the rep must write. So I do understand why the responsibility is placed on the rep. But there seems to be very little responsibility placed on the actual insurance companies to provide that. Now, a lot of them do provide those training platforms, but there are some that don't. How do we overcome that challenge as an FSP?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting question. And as you correctly said, the legislation places the responsibility on the FSPs. And the reason for that is that the FAIS Act can only oblige FSPs, key individuals, representatives, and compliance officers, the people that we regulate. We can't place an obligation on an entity such as an insurance company, because we don't regulate the insurance company. I'm not talking about them in their capacity as an FSP. I'm talking about them in their capacity as the product provider, because that is then dealt with under other pieces of legislation. So we have a restriction on how far we can impose obligations on entities. What you can do is, if you want to send us the details of those insurance companies, we could have an offline conversation with them and see if it is possible for them to extend the product training specific services that they offer to entities such as yourselves that they have contracts with. The other thing that you can do is you can create your own assessment, and it can be a paper-based assessment, and that you get people to write, and then you can just put that on record. I understand that imposes quite a technical challenge on you as the person who, and maybe I shouldn't say this here before I get a lot of hate mail, but I create the assessments for the webinars. So I do understand how tricky it is to ask questions that are sensible without trying to catch people out, because your aim should never be to try and catch people out. It's really just to assess that people actually understand what they heard, what they listened to, what they maybe read, depending on how you provided the training. So the idea is not to make the training particularly difficult, but it is to make it comprehensive so that you are comfortable that people do understand it. You could even do it in your office environment in a quiz format. So if you draw up some questions and you said, okay, today we have the following 10 people in the office, we're going to be in 2 teams, and we assess you via a quiz. That obviously, again, requires development work on your side for the quiz and the correct answers, and then just keeping record of who actually attended that morning. So there are various ways in which to do it, but all of them require upfront work. There is no way to get around that. And obviously, if a product provider assists you, that alleviates a little bit of the burden that you carry at the FSP side.
Absolutely, yes. And there are many that do provide those platforms, which is great, and it does facilitate us a lot. It's the ones that don't that actually creates the practical problem for the FSP. Because the KI is not necessarily that knowledge on the product either, especially in a multiple contract environment where your KI does a lot of overseeing work, but doesn't necessarily on a day-to-day basis get involved in the selling and the advisory processes on those products. So it does create a challenge for the FSPs out there. All right, but you've answered the question sufficiently for us to understand what the situation could be and what the possible solutions could be and why you cannot extend your authority there anymore. The second question that I have is, when you have a person working in your FSP, just facilitating claims between a client and an insurer. In other words, that person just acts as a conduit between the client and the insurance company for the processing and the handling of a claim. Does that person necessarily need to be registered as a representative on the license? Is that termed as intermediary services?
So, Johan, that's a very interesting question, and we could spend an hour just discussing this, but we won't, because we have a lot of other people who have questions as well. You are welcome to contact us offline, but for everyone, because I think this is a question that a lot of people often have, you have to read 3 definitions in the Act itself. So you need to take a look at the definition of intermediary service. So what you just described, processing claims, falls under the definition of intermediary service. And then you have to look at the definition of advice. And obviously what you just described does not fall within the definition of advice. You make a cross next to advice, a tick next to intermediary service. So the FSP is rendering intermediary service. And then you need to take a look at the definition of representative. So now it is a factual question. The FSP is rendering intermediary service because you are processing claims. So we're in agreement on that. Does the person who receives the claim checks that all the documentation is there and transfers it through to the insurance company? Is that person acting as a representative or not? And that is where you need to go and take a good look at the definition of representative. Especially on intermediary services, it is possible that the entity, the FSP, is rendering the intermediary service, but the actual admin person who is providing the physical passing through of documentation, that person may or may not fall within the definition of representative. And that's the three definitions that you need to interrogate.
Thanks, Charene. Appreciate that.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Johan, for interesting questions. Nadia, you have mic access. You can go ahead.
Morning, Charene. Thank you, fellow colleagues, for giving me the opportunity to ask my 2 questions, and the FSCA for hosting such a very informative session for the stakeholders. My question is twofold. It is on Johan's question. Board Notice 194 doesn't give an implementation date of intermediaries yet. Does the FSCA know when the implementation date is that all intermediaries need to be registered who act and give advice or perform claims procedures?
Nadia, can you tell me which section in Board Notice 194 you're referring to?
I can't give it to you offhand, but I can find it for you.
If you can find it and give it to me, because the bulk of 194 went into effect on 1 April 2018. And because it's quite, I'm sitting with it in my hand, but I don't want to give you wrong information because I missed the detail of something. So if you can type it in the chat function,
and then I can.
Yes, you're most welcome to do that.
Then
we can do that.
That will be great. That I could have that information. And the second part is, I'm an SDF for the group of companies I work for, and ASITA has advised that they're changing over to the ETQA qualification system from mid-June 2024. Would that, and I've looked on your list of qualifications, the qualifications that are on the ETQA aren't on that list yet. Do we know how that's going to affect the industry? Or not?
What would need to happen is it won't affect the recognition of any qualifications that are already on the list. Because if a qualification is on the list, some qualifications have even expired. You can't get the qualification anymore. Doesn't take away the validity of the person's qualification who has it already. So those of you who already have qualifications that are on the list, you don't have to worry that we're going to remove that recognition just because the CETA system changed. Okay, if there are any new qualifications that are not on the list, but if you interrogate our requirements around qualifications, you think this qualification should be on the list, you are welcome to contact us. We still use the email address fit and proper, one word, all written out, at fsca.co.za, and you can send any qualification related questions to that email inbox. It is monitored on a daily workday basis, and we do respond to any questions that we get there.
Sorry, Charene, I think I'm not interpreting my question correctly. Say now, for an example, you do underwriting. That's one of the ETQAs. And you move position, say, from an underwriter to a client care. Will that underwriting qualification under the new ETQA qualify you to be able to work in the client care space, or you move to claims assessor? Will you need to do a new qualification where the current qualification system, like the NQF short-term insurance as an example, the 39949, blanket covers every possible position held within client-facing brokers, your direct marketers, etc. We're just not sure how the implementation of this is going to affect the roles in which they report to or move within an insurance company.
Okay, Nadia, I'm with you. That is a very difficult question to answer in a session like this because we evaluate every qualification on the contents of the qualification. Okay. And with those qualifications, because they are role specific, they may or may not be broad enough that they would also cover you for a new role. So if we recognize the qualification for, let's just use this as an example, short-term insurance personal lines, then we would recognize that for short-term insurance personal lines.
Yeah.
But it might not necessarily cover you for long-term insurance category B, as an example. So if in your client services role, you now also deal with long-term insurance category B, you may find that you have to do an additional qualification.
Okay. It sort of
So
answers the
it's
question.
very difficult for us to say it's always a yes or always a no, because it does depend on the content of the qualification.
So these new ones of being like insurance underwriter, insurance administrator, claims assessor,
So
it's job specific. It may not cover you. So if you've got a DOFA date of, say, the 1st of February 2019, and you did insurance agent, insurance underwriter, and you move to a claims position, you may not possibly move to that claims position because your DOFA date has exceeded your qualifications, say, until you've completed the excessive one.
So
Is my understanding
remember
correct?
at this, so Nadia, remember, just because your role changes, the product category does not necessarily change. So if you did claims underwriting and now you're moving to claims service agent, I'm not sure if that's a title, but let's just pretend it is a title. But it all has to do with long-term, short-term insurance, personal and commercial lines. If we've recognized that qualification that you did for short-term insurance, personal and commercial lines, regardless of whether your role stayed the same or changed, as long as your product subcategories remain short-term insurance, personal and commercial lines, we would still recognize the product subcategories. Does that help you?
It's on the right track, but what I'll do is I will send you the information I have on a mail separately, not to confuse everybody on that, because I'm not sure if they fay with the change of the qualifications.
No problem,
But
Nadia.
thank you,
Please do
Charene.
so, and we will continue to assist you.
Thank
Thanks.
you very much.
Pleasure. Tamarant and then John Horsfall, you have mic access.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Morning.
I may have a little bit of a complicated question, but I'm going to give it a go in any event. So I'm going to give you an example. A candidate applies. The DOFA is the 1st of January 2005. They've got a short-term qualification that is acknowledged specifically for certain products or subcategories in the long-term insurance industry. But he has no long-term insurance experience. Would the candidate be required to apply for an extension in order to go under supervision, in order to provide advice? Or would it be deemed as, since he's never given advice in the long-term insurance space, that as of the date of appointment that he would be under supervision and has 6 years to obtain the qualification?
So, Tamarant, let me just understand this. So the question's not about the qualification. There are questions about the experience.
Yes.
When the person started in 2005, was he appointed for long-term insurance?
No.
Okay. So that's then quite simple. The person would be appointed for long-term insurance as a representative under supervision. He's already met the requirements for short-term because he was appointed for that initially. He would now have the relevant time period. I think for most of the long-term insurance products, it's 1 year to 2 years. And he would then have that period of time under supervision to obtain the experience. You would need to look at the qualification that he has. If the qualification is recognized as you say it is, then he doesn't need to do an additional qualification. We're working on the assumption he has done his RE5 as a representative. So the only thing that is missing here is experience under supervision.
Let's say, to continue on that, because that answer is great, thank you. Let's say that there's long-term categories for which the short-term qualification is not sufficient. how would we
in
approach
that
that
instance, he would then need to do an additional qualification that would give him recognition for the products that you have now appointed him for. So for the long-term insurance, he would have an additional DOFA date, and he would then have 6 years from that date to obtain the qualification for the additional products that you've now appointed him for.
Okay, that's so great. Thank you so much. That helps me greatly. It's
a
happening
pleasure.
more and more frequently at the moment. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. I hope it helped other people as well. Then we're moving to, I see we have a lot of hands. So if I could ask everyone to just ask your most critical question, please. John, you can go ahead. John Horsfall's mic access. John, you can unmute and go ahead. Okay. John, are you there? Okay, it looks as if we might have a problem with John. I'm going to go ahead to...
Sorry, can you hear me now?
There, John, there you are,
Yeah,
yes.
I keep clicking on my mic and it sort of keeps muting me. Sorry, Charene, a couple of points on the PST, product-specific training. Johan's question particularly, you know, I think the regulatory sort of situation needs to be taken into account, and that is the fact that the product-specific training can be offered by a competent person. In my view, over the years, the insurance companies have been very lax in coming forward in terms of offering product-specific training, but that is now beginning to happen. And my question relates to a particular client that I have. We've got a large number of reps, and they just had a quality assurance assessment done by an insurance company. And the insurance company have come back and said, right, all these guys have now got to do product-specific training. They are all reps who have been long qualified prior to 2018. And I just want to check on the regulatory situation, because with the number of reps and the number of hours that the insurer is now dictating that they need to be doing, the FSP is getting quite agitated about the fact that there's going to have so many people out there sort of doing product-specific training when they've got a lot of other stuff to do. What is the regulatory position in terms of the fact that these reps, as at 2018, were fully qualified, but now in terms of the QA, the insurance companies say they need more? Does the regulation dictate that they can insist on that?
So we don't provide that mandate in the FAIS legislation, but it is also a provision in the insurance legislation that the insurer must make sure that anyone who provides services in regards to their products must be competent to do so. So the way in which the insurance provider then interprets that is up to them. I would hazard a guess that what they are saying, and I take your point about the fact that the people were competent before 2018. But remember, the point was also made in Thabang's slides that product-specific training is ongoing. And every time there is an update and a material change to the benefits, the restrictions, maybe the reasons for repudiation. I mean, we've seen quite a lot of articles in the news over the recent few weeks as to short-term insurers who have put in additional restrictions on the short-term insurance products. So that's a material change and would need any advisor who's giving advice on those products to be updated about it and be able to explain the old requirements and the new requirements, or the old restrictions and the new restrictions, the old benefits and what isn't a benefit anymore. I like to use the medical schemes as an example there, because we know that every year medical schemes update their plans and what they include and what they exclude, and the plan benefits, etc. And then that means that before any broker who gives advice on a medical scheme product for that specific medical scheme must actually be trained so that they can give clients the most updated advice. So it might be that kind of situation where the product provider now feels that this specific FSP's representatives lack certain knowledge around how their specific products work. We see quite a lot of complaints that go through to the Ombud, where clients were under the impression that they were entitled to certain benefits, and then a claim is either repudiated in full or partly repudiated. And then the clients are very unhappy. And then it comes down to interpretation of the advice that the representative had given them. So I do think that it is incredibly important that FSPs must do their level best to ensure that their representatives are at all times updated as to any changes that a product provider makes about their products, and that they can give clients information about the newest changes, not only new clients, but also existing clients. So I hope I've answered you to an extent here, John.
I think you have to a certain extent, but as I say, you know, what the insurer is looking for, something with somewhere between 8 and 12 hours per rep over the next couple of months of product-specific training. And I can't see that the product has changed to the extent that they are now required to do this 8 to 12 hours of product-specific training. And I must admit, in terms of what you were saying, where there are restrictions coming down, a lot of the insurers haven't passed the message down properly, and it just appears as an endorsement on an update.
Yeah, you see, so that for me is the kind of thing that really must be updated. It doesn't have to be a long, intense training, but there should be at least some kind of training and a record of that, because that's exactly the kind of thing that can have a big impact at claims or payment stage, whether it's an investment or a short-term or whatever kind of product that might be. Engage the insurer and maybe try to negotiate with them around that.
Okay. Thanks, Charene.
Thanks, John. I'm moving on to Nkululeku. I am really sorry for my mispronunciation of your name. We're going to give you, you have mic access. Please go ahead. Nkululeku, are you there?
Morning, Charene. Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Sorry about that. My question relates to the qualifications. In our FSP, we have an individual rep who is under supervision, but in her DOFA profile, there's a 2-year gap, which relates to the qualification. Given what has happened in the past few years in terms of COVID and people are out of job, can there be a provision to extend the 6-year qualification by maybe a year or 2? That's the question. Thank you.
That's a really good question. And yes, but it's not an automatic or a blanket extension. She would have to, or you as the FSP would need to apply for a formal exemption, providing your reasons why the person had this gap, why the qualification hasn't been completed, the action plan, and then your commitment as to what will be done. And that is then presented to our senior management, and they will decide whether the conditions are severe enough, the situation that is described, that they can actually justify an exemption. So what you can do is you can type your details in the chat function and the fact that you want information about the exemption, and we will send you the information about the exemption process.
Okay, thank you. I'll do that just now.
Excellent, thank you. Then we're moving to Ubadia. Ubadia, please unmute your microphone and you can pose your question. Okay, it looks as if we have lost Obadja. I'm going to move to Christine. Christine, please unmute your mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I just want to ask something. So clause of business, I know it's only a short portion and it's not regulated, but what we in a call center? So I have a lot of reps. So we work through Masthead and Moreku, and then we write the clause of business through there. I know there's a few other suppliers as well, but then they don't pass the Moreku, and then I get like fishy suppliers that gives them certificates. But if I go onto the website, I see they're accredited within theatre, they're all valid training, say suppliers. So I just want to know, how do we go about in reporting suspicious certificates? I'm not going to mention names, but if I can mail it to you or maybe send you the information. But I did investigate. I called the KI. Everything seems legit, but my call seems.
Christine, so use the fit and proper at fsca.co.za email address.
Yeah.
And if you have examples of such certificates that you could attach, it would be very helpful. We have people who would then investigate the legitimacy of those certificates and the training provider.
Okay, great. I'll do that. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Then I'm going to move to Sipu. Sipu, you have mic access.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So my question is with regards to the product DOFA. So you employ someone and they get their date of first appointment. And so say the product is short-term personal lines, and at some point in the year, you need to add short-term commercial lines. Do they need to do or go under supervision for that specific product that you've added? So that's the first question. The second question is there any way that the FSCA is looking into professionalizing the reporting of continuous professional development? Because at the current moment, I'm not too sure with regards to the reporting. Thank you.
So the first question is yes. The moment you appoint the person for an additional product category, they get a new DOFA date. So the original DOFA date will always be the overall DOFA, but they would have product-specific DOFA dates as well. So every time you appoint them for a new one, they would then be under supervision for that, and they would have a specific period that is relevant to that. I'm not quite sure what you mean with professionalizing the reporting. You have to have a competence register on your site. We are not asking for you to upload it to us at this stage. We might in the future, but at this stage we're not. But you have to record the CPD, the class of business, the qualifications, the experience, as well as the product-specific training of all of your representatives on your internal competence register. And if we ask you to submit it to us, which we do if there is a query, for instance, or if we are conducting a management meeting or an on-site visit with your FSP, then you must be able to provide us with the information that we request.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. I am going to take Priyan Naidu because Priyan has been very patiently waiting for a chance. Salapi and Rudnell, and then I'm going to stop the questions so that we can take a quick 5-minute leg stretch and then carry on with the rest of the presentation. So Priyan, you have mic access.
Thank you, Charene. My question is regarding CPD. At recruitment stage, we conduct fit and proper checks on the candidate. How far back are we expected to check compliance with CPD? Is it for the current cycle or the previous cycle? And then my second question is, if there's a break in service and CPD points were not obtained, how does a candidate rectify that?
Okay. So first of all, how far back do you check? At this stage, you would check back to the very first cycle, because we would expect you to at least check back for 5 years if the person's been a representative for 5 years. Obviously, depending on whether they were under supervision or not, they might not have needed to obtain CPD for the whole period. So you would need to check that. Then if there was a break in service, if you look at the slide that is on the screen, you would actually apply that calculation. So let's say in the last CPD cycle, the person was not a representative for 5 months. Just going to use this example again. Then you would say the person was only a representative for 7 months, and then do the 7 months calculation against the requirement. So we just use 12 hours in this example. Remember, the person, depending on what they've been appointed for, might only need 6 hours or 12 hours or even 18 hours in a year. So if it was 7 months and the person only needed 6 hours, you would then divide 6 by 12, which would give you 0.5, and then you would multiply 0.5 by 7, which would give you 3.5 hours. So maybe the person's done 3.5 hours already, but they wouldn't need to get the whole 12 months value of CPD if they weren't a rep for the whole 12 months.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, I understand the pro rata part of it, but if the representative didn't obtain the points needed for that pro rata period as well, how would they rectify it in order to be employed again by an FSP?
So they would need to do CPD. So even if they do CPD in a cycle and they actually missed it for the previous cycle, you would then need to obtain CPD certificates from the person, and in your competence register, record the fact that they are going to be using this CPD obtained here to cover the gap where they had the gap. You can't double count the CPD then.
Okay, so if they do the CPD now, it covers for, so we can almost backdate it for the time that they've missed.
So you won't backdate it, you would just record it that you are using this CPD for that period, because backdating it would actually be forgery, but you're just recording the fact that you are allocating it.
Okay, yeah, maybe backdate is the wrong word. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, because we can't go back to that period. The period's come and gone. So all you can now do is then do additional in this period and allocate it to that. And please make sure that you record it properly in your competence register.
Okay, thank you so much. I wasn't sure whether they needed to apply for an exemption or just inform the FSCA. It's come and gone already.
So if they can fix it, then yes. If they can't, then you would need to apply for an exemption before you appoint them.
Okay, thank you.
It's a pleasure. Then it is Salapi and then Runel. Salapi, just hold on. Let's give you mic access. Salapi, you can unmute and go ahead.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Charene, thank you so much for the opportunity. I wanted to ask, let's say, for example, we have done an intake of new reps, right? And in the intake, part of our agreement is that they have to, give authorization that we can check their criminal records and everything via fingerprints and stuff. And then they've already gone through training for our product, and we have already have their CVs and stuff. And then because we know that they've already gone through the process that we need and they've got all the qualifications, and then we find after we have already added them on the FSCA rep register that maybe that person has a fraud case, for example. This is actually on the honesty and integrity part. When we remove them from the rep register, because now we will have to then let them go, is it necessary for us to put it in the rep register? I mean, like when we're removing them, the reason for removing them, do we need to do a debar application as well, or what do we need to do as an FSP?
So you would need to debar the person because they are your representative at that stage already. Provide the reasons for the debarment, so follow the proper debarment process, and debar the person and then remove them from your rep register.
Oh, okay. So if so far, then we've already only just remove them. And then we actually mentioned that they've just been terminated because the agreement that they sign does stipulate that even though we have already taken them in, but should we get that they do have a criminal record that actually speaks to our line of business, that we will just have to terminate them. So we still need to do the debarment process still.
Yes. So it
Okay.
sounds as if you might need to update your HR process to just note that it also includes debarments. And where you have people such as what you've just described, please contact our offices, because you will also need to do a debarment in terms of Section 153 of the FSR Act.
Okay.
Which is when the person is not your representative anymore, but you've come aware of information that would lead to debarment in terms of dishonesty.
Okay, no problem. Thank you so much, Charene.
It's a pleasure. Runel, you are our last questioner for this period, not for the day. Runel, are you there?
Charene?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I was speaking on mute, so I just have to repeat what I said. So I just wanted to thank you and everyone at the FSCA for making the session available. It's very informative. Thank you very much. With that being said, the question I have is that an FSP, so they've appointed an individual who has been in the industry for quite some time already. The individual had the certain subcategories that they required, but when they joined this FSP, it was omitted one subcategory for which they were appointed for. So by the time, so a time has lapsed, so we're saying about a few years has lapsed. I've taken over compliance, and now I've identified that there's a subcategory which this individual should have had, is not added. And then it looks like this was omitted when the person was taken on at the FSP during that time. So I just need to find out, now that we've identified this, keeping in mind this person has been in the industry, they've had the product before. It was just purely on the FSP side that they omitted to add the subcategory to the individual's profile. What do we do in this scenario?
Runel, please can you send us an email with the contact, with the situation and your FSP number, the person's information, etc. And then we will put you in contact with our colleagues in the licensing department. I think they might be in a position to assist you.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you very much, Charene.
It's a pleasure. So this has been a very interesting question session. So thank you very much for that, your participation. We really appreciate it. We are going to take a very quick break. I am going to give you just 4 minutes just to stretch your legs. And we're going to start at 10:15 because we have quite an intense program for today. So a quick run, 4 minutes. We're starting at 10:15 with our next session. Thank you very much, everyone. Hi, everyone. I hope you managed to do everything you needed to in this very, very quick break. And we have Fortune Moreku ready to take us through the next section. Fortune, over to you. Thank you so much for being available for the session this morning.
Okay. Thank you so much, Charene and Thabang, for the earlier session. As introduced, my name is Fortune Moreku, and I'll be taking you through the next slide, which deals with the exemption of services under supervision, as published in our in the authority's website, FAIS Notice 86 of 2018. The purpose of this exemption is to allow for the appointment of representatives to work under supervision where the representatives were appointed for the first time in respect of the category and the subcategories. And also to allow for the newly appointed representatives to work under supervision, subjected to the specific conditions. We will discuss the specific conditions in our next slides. And another one is to allow sufficient time for the newly appointed representative to meet the relevant competency requirements in relation to the category and subcategories for which they were appointed. And this exemption does not apply to product-specific training. As my colleague already explained, that product-specific training, the rep needs to be trained before they can offer any services to the client or to the potential client. The next slide deals with the conditions. The entry-level requirements for representatives that are under the category 1 and category 4 are required to have a grade 12 national certificate or equivalent qualification. For representatives that are only appointed for execution of sales only, they are required to have a grade 10 or equivalent. For category 1, FSP that are only appointed for 1.1 and 1.19, these are your friendly society and your federal policies are excluded from this requirement. And for category 2, 2A and 3, they are required to have a recognized qualification at the degree level. My colleagues have already touched on about the recognized qualification that we have it on our website, is there on the authority's website. I think they've also shared the link to the recognized qualification.
Fortune, sorry to interrupt you. We can't see that the slides have moved on.
On my side, it has moved on.
Could you perhaps just backtrack one slide and try again, because it's still stuck on the heading slide.
Okay. I'm not sure what might be the problem. Can perhaps share the slides on the side? I'm not sure what's happening on my side.
Sure. Let me stop sharing on your side and I'll start from my side.
Thank you.
Can you see the slides, Fortune?
It is blurry on my side. I'm not sure if other colleagues can see it on their side. Yes, I can see it now.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, we can move to the next slide. It is slowly on my side. It hasn't moved to the next slide.
Sorry, can we just ask the audience, can you see a slide that says conditions to specific compliance periods on your side?
I can see it now, yes, Charene, on my side also.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. The next slides deal with the specific compliance period. I'll start with the experience. Board Notice 194 of 2017 prescribed a minimum experience as per the Annexure 1, Table 1 and 2. The experience here, the requirements of the minimum experience, it will depend on the product subcategories or the product that the rep has been appointed for. Some will require a 6 months experience, 12 month or 18 month. So it depends on what the product is the rep going to be registered for and what is it that they're going to offer. And once we have registered the rep or put the rep under the supervision, it is required that the rep must be assessed at the end of the supervision period. So the rep needs to be assessed at the end of the supervision period when the minimum experience has been acquired. Then we'll move to the qualification. The representatives under the supervision have got 6 years maximum to complete the recognized qualification.
Sorry, Fortune.
Of course.
Sorry to cut you short. Fortune, it's a caution. Sorry to cut you short. Charene, the slides are not showing anymore.
Oh my goodness, it's still showing on my side. Thanks, Akashan. Let me stop share and start share again.
I can see the slides, Charene.
Akashan, can you see it?
Not on my end, the blank screen now. Okay, but I think the industry, the industry can say if they can see it, Charene, then we can carry on. If
It's
internal,
blank on my
it's fine.
side too.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, the only
Charene,
thing I
sorry,
can do
it
is
could perhaps be that it's still showing like on the side, the slide numbers, that it's not presenting maybe.
that's really strange because on my side it's actually on the presentation screen. But let me stop.
Yeah.
And let me start again. Can you see the slides?
Yes, Charene, I can see.
It's a blank screen from my side.
I'm literally not sure how to solve that problem now.
I think I saw some thumb up, Charene. I think some of our colleagues can see the slides. I'm not sure with others.
Could I ask,
Yeah, now they appear.
are they appearing, Julia?
Yes, I can see it, but it's big. It's too full on the screen. I can't see it clearly. I see half of it.
Okay, I can try to change the presentation mode.
Most of the people on the chat, the industry says they see blank screen, no slides. They can't see. Some can see, some can't see.
So if I change it, sorry, it's now jumped completely. If I do this, can you see the slide?
It's blurry, Charene. I saw the first page clearly, but now it went blurry.
because I've made it smaller in an attempt to, so that you can see.
But now,
it is blurry also on my side, Charene, but I see the industry, they're saying they can see the slides.
yeah,
Okay.
some can, some cannot.
I am so sorry for everyone who can't see it. We will post the slides on the website so that you can then see the slides again afterwards. But I think if we can see the slides for some people, we're probably not going to solve the problem for everyone right now. Do you want to go ahead, Fortune?
Yes, Charene, I can go ahead on my side and try and project it because right now it's blurry. I can't see your slides. I think we
Okay,
will
I'm
post
going to stop.
the slides, Charene.
Yeah, I'm going to stop and then you continue, Fortune, with your slides.
Thank you. Okay. I'm not sure if you can see the slides, but anyway, I will continue on my side.
We can see Fortune.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I was on qualification. Okay, the supervised representatives have got a 6 years maximum period to complete the recognized qualification. Of course, this exclude the subcategory 1.1 and 1.19. 1.1 and 1.19 we are referring to your friendly society and your general policies, those end product. The next one we're dealing with the regulatory examination. The supervised representatives have got 2 years from the date of first appointment to pass the regulatory examination. The period is linked to the date of first appointment, and it only applies to Category 1 FSP, Tier 1 advice and intermediaries, Category 2, 2A, 3, and Category 4. The next slide deals with the class of business. The supervised representatives have got 12 months to complete the class of business training from the date of first appointment. The last one is a continuous professional development. After the supervised representatives, after meeting the qualification, regulatory examination, class of business, or after 6 years, whichever occurs first, the supervised representative is required to comply with the requirements of continuous professional development. Of course, this only applies to Category 1, Tier 1 advice and intermediaries, Category 2 and Category 2A, 3, and Category 4. Okay, the next slide, it's an example of what to just explain regarding the continuous professional development. Yeah, it says John Doe is a supervised representative appointed for more than one subclass of business within a single class of business and must therefore complete a minimum of 12 hours of CPD per CPD cycle. Okay, he complied with the experience, class of business, and RE and qualification requirements on the 1st of December. Of course, we are aware that the CPD cycle starts from the 1st of June and end 31st of May. So the calculation will be like this. So X represents a number of annual required CPD hours, which is equal to 12 hours. Y represents a number of months from the date of compliance until the end of the CPD cycle. We are aware here that John complied with the requirements in December. So it means John is only left with 6 months of the CPD cycle to complete the CPD points. So our calculation will be like this. It will be 12 hours divided by 12, of which is equals to 1, and then times 6 months. And it's 6 CPD hours. Let's say if John was required to complete an 18 hours of CPD. So it will be 12 hours divided by 18, of which it will give you about 1.5, if I'm not mistaken. Then you will multiply that one with 6 months, and then it will give you the total number of hours that is required to complete the CPD cycle. Okay, the next slide deals with the supervision agreement. This is a written document. So the agreement must identify the supervisor. This written document is from the FSP. So the agreement must identify the supervisor, set out the task, functions performed by the supervised representatives on behalf of the FSP. Must also identify it must also have identify the relevant knowledge and skills and expertise required to perform this task and functions. And it must also identify the training needs of the supervised representatives and the training program to be implemented to address these needs. And also must also have a supervision arrangement details such as duties and responsibilities of both parties. Both parties, I'm referring to your supervised representatives and the supervisor. Supervision policies, procedures, processes, monitoring, and assessment. And must also identify when the intensity of the supervision may be reduced, and when and how the supervised representative will be assessed. So yeah, we already discussed it that the supervised representatives need to be assessed. So on the supervision agreement, it needs to be stated clearly when and how the supervised representative will be assessed. And it must also have a sign-off criteria by the supervisor. The next slide deals with the duties of the FSP. The duties of the FSP is to appoint a representative under supervision. Importantly, the FSP must have an operational ability. Operational ability, we are referring to human, technical, and technological resources, controls, procedures, governance framework to appoint, monitor, and supervise representatives. It must also ensure that the appointment does not materially increase any risk to the FSP or the fair treatment of the client, impair the quality of the governance framework of the FSP, or prevent the FSP to act in the best interest of the client. And it must also ensure that a working relationship exists between the supervisor and the supervised representative to have an oversight of the activities of the supervised representative. It must also be able to review the effectiveness and adequacy of the supervision agreement at regular intervals, and ensure that the supervised representatives actively pursue the completion of the class of business training, regulatory examination, recognized qualification within the prescribed time limit, and reflect on the register of representative whether the person is working under supervision, and update the register within 15 days after the supervision has ended. The next slide deals with the duties, or it's a continuation of the duties of the FSP. The duties of the FSP also is to assign a supervisor to the supervised representative. The supervisor must have adequate, appropriate, relevant skills, expertise in respect of the same services that the supervised representatives is appointed for. And the supervisor must meet the minimum prescribed competency requirements applicable to the representatives or the key individual managing the relevant services and class of business. And the supervisor must be able to coach and must have an assessment skills to assess the supervised representatives. And the supervisor must also have an operational ability to monitor and supervise the representative working under the supervision. Here we are referring to, let me just give you an example. Let's say the supervised representative is appointed to work on the field. So the supervisor is expected to have an operational ability to monitor and supervise the representatives while working on the field or on the field. So as to how and that it will be determined by the FSP, as it is the duty of the FSP to ensure that the supervisor has got that operational ability to monitor. So let's say if another example, if the FSP has got, let's say 10, 15 representatives working under the supervision, the supervisor must still have that operational ability to monitor those representatives when they are performing their duties on the field. The next slides deal with the duties of the supervisor. The supervisor must mentor and coach in respect of the financial services and product. Must also be able to review, assess at regular intervals, recording observation and areas for development. The supervisor must also ensure compliance with the supervision agreement. The supervisor must also report unfair treatment of a client to the FSP. Let's say the representative under supervision was not honest when providing the services to a potential client or to a client. It is the duty of the supervisor to report the supervised representative to the FSP. The supervisor must also record the document method, the frequency and the intensity of supervision. And also the last one, the supervisor must keep records relating to the development and training, supervision activities, assessment, and decision to reduce the intensity of the supervision. So if let's say the supervisor have signed an agreement to say that the supervised representatives will work under the supervision, let's say, and the supervisor will review the work or the work of the supervised representative on a, let's say, weekly basis or monthly or on a daily basis. They must also record that if the supervisor decided to reduce the intensity of the supervision. The next slide deals with the representative duties. the representative duties is required to disclose to the clients that it is rendering the financial services under supervision. It needs to disclose this upfront that it is rendering the services under the supervision, and actively pursue the completion of the class of business training, regulatory examination, and the recognized qualification within the prescribed time limit. And finally, is to adhere to the provision of the supervision agreement at all times. The next slide deals with the intensity of the supervision. The FSP must determine the arrangement and intensity of the supervision that must apply, in regards to the nature, scale, and complexity of the financial services and financial product to be rendered by the supervised representatives. The supervised representative assessed level of competency and the risk to clients and the FSP. An example here, what I just explained now, is it will depend on the product that the FSPs are offering. Some other FSPs are offering products that are not complicated. Let's say your 1.1 and 1.19 versus your other product. So yeah, the FSP will determine the intensity of the supervision. So for 1.1 and 1.19, this is an example, they can relax the intensity. Let's say instead of supervising the supervised representative or reviewing the work of the supervised representative on a daily basis, they can review it on a weekly or monthly. This is just an example of what we've just explained now. The next one deals with the FSP must at regular intervals review the appropriateness, effectiveness, and adequacy of the supervision arrangement and the level of intensity of the supervision, and must also determine the criteria and the procedure to assess whether it is appropriate for a supervised representative to work under a reduced level of intensity of supervision. I think I have already touched on the intensity of supervision on how the FSP can reduce it. Charene, I think up until here we can take questions if there is any questions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Akash. And I see we have Mitzi. Mitzi, we're going to give you mic access now. Mitzi, you can unmute and ask your question. Mitzi Ginsburg. Okay, we've lost her. Lida, we're going to give you mic access. Lida, you can unmute and ask your question.
Can you hear me, Charene?
Yes, I can.
Just on the tier 2 products, tier 2 products on board notice 194 says that they're exempt from class of business TPD and RE exams on the tier 2 products. Their qualification,
that's right, yes.
Their qualification, they need an NQF level 4. Now, matric is on NQF level 4. Do they need an additional qualification above and beyond that NQF level 4, like an NQF level short-term qualification, or is their matric sufficient?
So as an entry level, their matric would be sufficient. And as long as they are restricted to tier 2, then let me just check that.
Well, it says that they are exempt from CIB clause. The only thing that they're not exempt from, it doesn't state in the Act itself whether they are exempt from a qualification. It just says NQF level 4. So I just want to know if the NQF level 4 matric is sufficient, or do they need an additional qualification?
Lida, I am talking under correction here. I must just check that up. I'm sorry, I don't have that in a printed format in front of me, so I must just look at the screens. But I think that as long as they have product-specific training and then they work in a tier 2 environment, they won't need an additional qualification.
Okay, so they exempt, they are like 1.1 and 1.19, that they are exempt from everything as long as they just stick to tier 2 products. Am I correct? Okay.
The problem is that if they want to move into the tier 1 on the same product, they would need to meet all the requirements then.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I understand that because they would be giving advice, but if they're just sticking to tier 2 products, they would not need an additional qualification.
No, they won't.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Any other questions? Any other hands at this stage? And I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to all our colleagues who are so diligently responding to the questions in the chat function. We have a number of colleagues who's helping with that, and we really appreciate their assistance. Okay, I don't see any other hands at this stage. So let's take a 10-minute leg stretch because we have quite an intense session left. Fortune, thank you very much for also persevering with the slide problems that we've had. Doesn't matter how much you prepare, there's also always something that goes wrong on the day of the presentation, but thank you for coping with that. So my clock says it is 10:46. So could I have everyone back at 10:55, please? So you get a 9-minute leg stretch. Hopefully you have power to make a quick cup of coffee. And we'll see you back at 10:55. Hi, everyone, and back. I hope everyone had a chance to stretch their legs, get something to drink. For those of you who needed to smoke, that you managed to get a quick puff or two. And we are ready for our last session of this day. Please let me know if you can see the slide. Okay, it looks as if we can see slides. And Letukuli, I'm going to give you, you've got mic access. Do you want to go ahead? Okay. Okay, so let's take a quick look at those people who are appointed for execution of sales. So in the legislation, it's called execution of sales, but I know that most people talk about scripted sales. So when you hear scripted sales and you're looking for that in the legislation, you're not going to find it, but you are going to find execution of sales. And execution of sales is dealt with in sections 13 and then section 22 of fit and proper. And I'm just going to summarize what this means. So there's a trade-off between the regulatory requirements that we impose on those people who are representatives under execution of sales and the key individuals. So we expect more involvement of the key individuals when they've appointed people for execution of sales. Because the people who are appointed for execution of sales only have to meet the product-specific training. So they need to be able to have technical knowledge, skills and expertise, and understanding changes in the market to the financial products, the financial services, any systems that they use, and legislation that impacts on them. But we don't impose high requirements on people appointed for execution of sales in terms of entry-level qualifications. So if you're appointed for execution of sales, then you could, for instance, be appointed with an entry-level qualification and you don't need to get a further qualification. But as I said, there is a trade-off because anyone who's appointed for execution of sales must work under the supervision of a key individual. We also tend to think of execution of sales as only being relevant in a call center environment. We have seen some people who are appointed for execution of sales, and then they work in a kiosk that is set up in typically a mall environment. Now, there it becomes quite challenging because everyone who works in that kiosk under execution of sales then also needs to work under the direct supervision of a key individual. And I think that is something that a lot of FSPs don't necessarily take into account and cater for when they are dealing with execution of sales. So if you have appointed people for execution of sales, please do make sure that you cater for all of the requirements. As I said, it's section 13 and section 22 of Fit and Proper Board Notice 194/2017 that provides you with those requirements. If we then look at the appointment of representatives, section 40 of Fit and Proper very specifically talks about when an FSP appoints a representative, and it says that when it appoints a person as a representative, that person must not be an unrehabilitated insolvent. So whether it is a natural person or a juristic person, that person cannot be an unrehabilitated insolvent or unrehabilitated liquidation. So that is an important issue to consider. So this applies to the person is not your representative yet. You are thinking of appointing the person. You must conduct a check to see whether the person is an unrehabilitated insolvent or not. So then we get the question, but what happens if I've appointed the person and at appointment, the person was fine, no financial problems, but life happens and this person is now an unrehabilitated insolvent or is on the way towards dealing with that. Section 40 also deals with that. So in section 40, subsection 5, we then say if a representative who is a natural person, so it's me, Charene, is sequestrated after the appointment referred to in subsection 1, the FSP who appointed the representative may allow such representative to continue on behalf of the FSP as the representative if the FSP implements appropriate measures to mitigate any risks that may arise for clients or the FSP as a result of the representative being sequestrated. So what this means is I've been working for Fortune's FSP, and life happened to me and I become sequestrated in my own capacity. Fortune now can choose to allow me to continue to act as a representative, provided he puts in place measures in his FSP to ensure that my financial situation does not pose any risk for the client and it does not impose any risk for the FSP. So if that can be put in place and it can be monitored, then he can choose to allow me to continue to work for him. But if he hasn't appointed me yet, and I am an unrehabilitated insolvent, I am sequestrated, then he can't appoint me as his representative. So there are two different scenarios. I'm already a representative or I'm not a representative yet. If we carry on with this, then we also see that section 41 of Fit and Proper says that representatives must have the operational ability to perform the functions that they are appointed for. In other words, I must have access to a telephone, I must have access to documentation, I must be able to reach clients, clients must be able to reach me, I must be able to record all of the activities that I performed on behalf of the FSP. I must have access to the systems. So if there are systems requirements for laptops, etc., then the FSP and I must sort out how we are going to overcome that so that I have the operational ability to perform the functions. The FSP must ensure that that is in place. If there is a juristic rep, then section 41 also said that for every juristic representative, there must be at least one key individual to oversee the representatives who are sitting within that juristic representative, because a juristic representative is a legal entity appointed by the FSP as a representative. But within that juristic representative, there are going to be natural people as representatives, and they must also be appointed as the representatives of the FSP. And obviously they must be supervised. So there must be a key individual for every juristic representative to manage and oversee the activities of those natural people within the juristic representative. We're talking about one, but depending on the size and the spread of the juristic representative, one key individual may not be sufficient, and they may also need additional key individuals. So you must take that into account as well. Julia, I see you've got your hand up. Is there a problem?
Yes, Charene. The slide is stuck on slide 33. It's not moving for most of the people on the chat.
So I've moved it on to slide 35. Can you? So on my side, it's showing slide 35. Can you see that yet?
Yes, I can see 35 now.
Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. Let's see if you can see that.
No, it's not moving, Charene. Some people are saying they're still on 33.
So on my side, it's on 36 now.
35.
So I've moved to slide 36 on my side. I think it's very slow. Julia, I've changed the presentation mode. Is this better? Can you see it now?
It shows slide 35.
I'm just going to leave it on this slide because I think the transition's just very slow. On my side, it's showing. hopefully it will move over just now. So
Yeah, I
on
think for
juristic,
some people is, sorry, Sharon, for some people it's faster, for some it's very low. So I think,
yeah,
we'll carry on.
look, everyone, you know, I think we are dependent on the load shedding schedules. So on my side, it moves fast because I'm not in load shedding now, but it might be slower on your side because of signal. The cell phone towers are also impacted by load shedding, and that could be causing this delay. So I'm going to continue to talk about juristic representatives. So remember, a juristic representative is not a natural person, but it is contacted by a FSP to act as a representative on its behalf. As we've said, that there must be at all times at least one key individual to oversee the rendering of the financial services by the people sitting within the juristic representative. Depending on the size of the juristic representative, that juristic representative may need multiple key individuals. So that is a discussion between the key individual of the FSP or the management of the FSP and the management of the juristic representative as to how they are going to be managing that. The key individual of the juristic representative must meet the same experience, qualifications, and regulatory examination requirements as would apply to the key individual of the provider. The difference is that here, that key individual's appointment is managed completely by the FSP. The FSCA does not approve the appointment of that key individual of the juristic representative. The FSP must go through the processes to make sure that the key individual of the juristic representative meets all the requirements. Then on key individuals, so we have requirements for key individuals as well, and this is now key individuals of FSPs as well as juristic representative. So if a key individual is approved for more than one FSP or is acting on behalf of more than one juristic representative, that key individual must have the operational ability to do this and must disclose this to all the FSPs that they are acting for. This also applies if the key individual is a key individual of an FSP or a juristic representative, and they are also a representative on another FSP. So in this instance, the FSPs must check that the key individual has the operational ability to perform the functions that they are supposed to perform for that specific FSP. So this is where a person has multiple roles, and they have multiple roles also on multiple juristic representatives or multiple roles on multiple FSPs. This can become very, very difficult for one person to execute and to execute successfully. So the FSPs must be aware of this, and then they must perform their own independent checks to see whether this person actually has the operational ability to perform the functions that they are expecting that person to perform. And doing this once off is not sufficient. You would have to do this on an ongoing basis. You can see that there is a requirement in section 42 that the FSP must regularly assess the operational ability of their key individuals. So I would say at least once a year, but in some instances, it might be necessary to do this more often. Then if we take a quick look at financial soundness, now we've had multiple sessions on financial soundness, so I'm not going to be spending a lot of time on this, but there's just a couple of things that we want to highlight here. So let me just get my own slide to move. So section 43, which talks about the general financial soundness requirements, has an exclusion. It does not apply to a key individual or a natural person, a representative that is a natural person. So they are exempted from meeting the financial soundness requirements. So their assets do not need to exceed the liabilities in terms of the calculation that we impose. And it also does not apply to banks and insurance companies because they have to meet the financial soundness requirements that is regulated by the Prudential Authority. So they're not exempted from financial soundness, they're just exempted from our specific FAIS financial soundness requirements. So as a natural person, key individual, or a natural person representative, you cannot be an unrehabilitated insolvent before you are appointed. And if you are sequestrated after you've been appointed, then the FSP must consider whether they can continue to employ you as their representative. Then section 44 has general requirements that also applies to juristic representatives, which is why I've highlighted this here. So no person may become or continue as an FSP, my apologies, or a juristic representative if they are declared insolvent or provisionally insolvent, placed under liquidation or provisional liquidation, or is subject to any pending proceedings which may lead to this outcome. And they also cannot be an FSP or a juristic representative if, subject to section 9.3, it seriously and persistently failed or fails to manage any of its financial obligations satisfactorily. And then in section 44.4, no person may become an FSP or a juristic representative if business rescue proceedings have commenced in respect of that person. So here we are talking about juristic entities and what are the requirements for juristic entities. So those FSPs who have juristic representatives, you need to check on an ongoing basis that your juristic representatives meet the requirements as set out in section 44 subsection 3 and 44 subsection 4. Section 45 then says, a category 1 FSP or a juristic representative of a category 1 FSP that does not collect or hold money, the requirement that they must meet at all times is that the assets must exceed the liabilities, and the assets include goodwill, and the liabilities calculation includes subordinated loans. So we do not subtract the subordinated loans from the calculation of liabilities. It actually is included in the calculation of liabilities. So your assets must exceed your liabilities at all times. And this also applies to the juristic representatives. If we look at section 48 and 49, here it talks about juristic representatives of category 1 FSPs that collect or hold money or assets, or category 2 and 3 and 4 FSPs. The juristic representative here must submit to the FSP that appointed it on a half-yearly basis Form A in Annexure 6, and that is the solvency calculation. So that form has to be completed by the juristic representative and submitted to the FSP every 6 months. And then section 49, which deals with the early warning requirements, also applies to those juristic representatives. So what that in simple terms means is that if the assets do not exceed the liabilities with more than 10%, then the early warning requirements apply to the juristic representative as well. And the juristic representative needs to notify the FSP, and the FSP must then manage that process in terms of the requirements set out in section 49. So it applies to FSPs and they need to notify the FSCA, and it applies to juristic representatives and they need to notify the FSP that appointed them. So if this is not in place and you have juristic representatives, you must please start putting this in place. And then the last section that I want to talk about is, and we had a caller asking questions about this earlier, was what do you do if one of your representatives commit something that is a requirement in terms of the honesty and integrity. So it's a contravention of honesty and integrity. For instance, they acted fraudulently. I think one of my colleagues, and I'm sorry, it was either Thabang or Fortune, used the example of a person submitting policy applications with fraudulent signatures on it. So that would be a typical example of something that would lead to a debarment. So if you discover the fraudulent activity or the non-compliance with one of the requirements, such as competence requirements, but on the side of your representative, while they are your representative, you would submit the debarment for the person to the FSCA in terms of Section 14 of the FAIS Act, and the FSCA would then note that. If you discover this after the person has left your employ, they're not your representative anymore, then you would do a debarment in terms of Section 153 of the Financial Sector Regulation Act. We also have a couple of webinars that explains the processes to follow and the guidance note on debarments. So if you are looking for guidance on this, I would suggest that you visit our FSCA YouTube channel and then take a look at those videos on debarment that we recorded about 18 months ago. They have very, very detailed guidelines as to what you should be doing as an FSP if you have to debar a person. So we have officially come to the end of our formal presentation. I really want to thank you all for being with us and for asking so many questions. And the floor is open. If anyone wants to have mic access and talk to us, we can give you mic access. And Thabang and Fortune are with me, and they can also help field questions. And we have other colleagues in the audience as well. Regan, we are going to give you mic access. You can go ahead and ask you, unmute your mic.
Good morning, and thank you so much for the platform and for the session. With regards to financial soundness, I just wanted to quickly clarify in terms of liabilities. As a Category 1 FSP who deals predominantly with long-term insurance companies, we often have scenarios where reps leave our companies and we are left with lapses. And oftentimes we have to make some sort of an arrangement with the product providers, and it often happens that we need to sign AODs. Those AODs, is that a liability that we report on in terms of our financial statements, or is that just a trade transaction? I'm not sure how that works.
So, Regan, I am going to ask Fortune to help here and Thabang, because they are also our in-house financial experts. I think you would probably need to record it because it is a liability that you have acknowledged. But Fortune, could I ask you to just respond to this question? Okay, it looks as if we have a signal issue with him. Thabang, are you there? Are you able to just confirm? Sandy, I see your mic is unmuted. Do you want to take this? Reckon it looks as if we have lost mic access to my colleagues who are the financial experts. But my understanding is that you would need to acknowledge this on your financial statements under your liabilities. But what we can do is if you send us your query in the chat function with your email address, we can just make sure to respond to you after we've just confirmed that. Then I'm going to move to Nadia. Nadia, do you want to unmute and go ahead?
Sorry, it was raised in error. My most humblest apologies, colleagues.
No problem, thank you. Then I'm not sure about the pronunciation. Is it Lorraine? Lorraine Prince?
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. I have a question relating to also a Category 1 FSP, but it's particularly focused on the funeral parlors, the subcategory 1.1 guys. So in the industry, if you deal with funeral parlors, there are certain packages that the funeral parlors have available, and the FSPs only underwrite a portion of the package that is presented or provided by the funeral parlor to the client. So I was wondering, as a FSP, if that JR was appointed as a JR on the particular license, what authority do we have the right to access their financials if we are only underwriting a portion of their packages? Do we have the right to access their records?
So you would need to take a look at how you've set up the contractual agreement with them. But if you look at Section 44 of Fit and Proper, is specifically Section 44.3 and Section 44.4, you have to make sure that this does not apply to the juristic representative. So how are you going to make sure that this does not happen or does not apply to the juristic representative if you don't have access to their financial statements? So and normally it's one set of financial statements. So that's going to be something that you would need to sort out with them. And I just want you to take a look at this, Section 48 and 49, because typically they would be collecting premium. So you would fall under the requirements of Section 46 onwards, which includes Section 48. And here they would have to give you on a half-yearly basis, calculated in terms of their financial year, the Form A in Annexure 6 of Fit and Proper. And there they would have to give you the calculations of their financial soundness. And if you're not sure about something, if something doesn't make sense, you would have to ask questions and interrogate it further. So I think have these conversations up front with any new juristic representatives so they understand what they must submit. And for those that you already have contractual relationships with, make sure that they understand that this is a requirement in terms of law that they have to provide this information to you.
Okay, thank you for that.
Pleasure. Then I'm again, is it Liga? Kasim, you have mic access, you can go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted clarity around a good standing question where we ask, are you seriously or persistently failing to meet your financial obligations? How do you measure that, and how would you deem it seriously or persistently persistent failure? And do you view it from a perspective of a judgment or civil action against you? Or is this speaking to your adverse performance in terms of your management of your debt? I'm just looking for clarity around that section.
I think it's everything that you've just mentioned. If I use as an example, if you start getting regular emails or letters from your municipal council to say that you are in arrears on your municipal accounts, that would be an indication that you are not managing your financial situation. So if we go back to this, so if you are in arrears on accounts, then that would talk to seriously and persistently failing to manage the financial obligations. So if there are any issues where the person is not meeting their regular obligations, I want to say debt obligations, that could include salaries to people. It could be if they're not paying their taxes to SARS. So all of these financial obligations, the financial obligations that an entity has, are they meeting those obligations? So if they're not paying rent on the building that they're renting, if they're not paying the Wi-Fi provider, if they're not paying the electricity, if they're not paying the water and sanitation, whatever it is that they have to do, and they are on a regular basis not doing this. So it's seriously and persistently. And I would say persistently is, again, it's a judgment call. But I would say if, there's now 3 months of piled up arrears, that certainly talks to me for seriously and persistently. I hope that helps.
Yeah, so if somebody misses one payment, would we view that seriously and persistently? And then does this apply to just the FSP and KIs, or do we apply it across to the representative as well?
So remember what I said, this applies to the juristic representative. So this does not apply to the individual person. So this applies to the legal entity that you've appointed, because if I go back one side, the financial soundness obligations do not apply to the key individual or the representative in their natural person capacity.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Thank you so much.
No problem. Then we have Reagan and then John Horsfall. Reagan, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much. With regards, so I've got two questions. The one is with appointing juristic representatives. Is it allowed for the KI of the FSP to also be a KI on the juristic representative entity if the KI in the FSP is a shareholder in that juristic representative? And then number two, with regards to representatives that don't honor their financial obligations in terms of signed AODs with an FSP, but they are now practicing at another FSP. Does that warrant a honesty and integrity issue in terms of fit and proper requirements, and what action can the FSP take against such a person?
Okay, so the first question is the easy one. So remember this slide of section 42, I hope you can see it, but section 42 of fit and proper actually addresses that. So yes, you can be a key individual of the FSP and the juristic representative, but you must have the operational ability to do it. So appointing you is one thing, making sure that you have the time and the attention to perform both of those jobs properly. That's the big question. We know that there are some juristic representatives where the juristic representative is actually huge. And then you have one key individual for that juristic representative. The person is also the key individual of the FSP, but the person is also the financial manager of the FSP. And that's already a big job. So doing all three of those roles could be too much for one person. So it depends on what it is that the person do. And that's why we say assess the operational ability. We don't have a magic formula. So we can't say to you 1 key individual to 10 is the formula, because it really depends on how complex it is. What is this person doing and for whom is that person doing it?
Makes sense, yeah.
Okay. Then your next question, if there is an acknowledgement of debt and the person's not honoring that, that talks about not managing their financials. It does not necessarily talk about are they honest or dishonest. So I would say that you would need to deal with that on a case-by-case basis with that person. What is the reasons for this person not honoring the acknowledgement of debt? And depending on what you find, you may then want to contact the FSCA. We have colleagues in our regulatory action teams who are specialists on debarments. And if you have such a question, Reagan, I would suggest that you have a chat to them so that they can guide you on that before you start doing the paperwork.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Then, John Horsfall, we're going to give you mic access. You've got mic access.
Hi, Charene. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Hi.
Just referring to your slide number 42, relating to JRs registered in terms of 46(1)A. As far as I understand it, it's only JRs who are junior juristic reps of insurers that may be mandated to collect premium, not JRs generally. Is that not so?
So, John, it depends, because we do have juristic representatives who are collecting straight into the bank account of the FSP. They're not allowed to collect into their own bank accounts. So especially in the funeral space, we would find the juristic representative collecting the money, but they can't deposit it into their own bank account. That money must be deposited straight into the bank account of the FSP, or alternatively straight into the bank account of the insurer, depending on the relationship, on the contractual relationship.
Okay.
And remember, the juristic representative cannot enter into a relationship on their own. They have to enter into a relationship that is actually the FSP enters into the relationship, not the juristic representative.
With the collection agency?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Pleasure. Then we've got Cholufelo.
Thanks, Charlene. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. My question is based on the first part of your presentation, execution of sales, and I'm not sure if anyone has asked that question, especially on the issue of key individuals having direct oversight over those activities, execution of sales. I was wondering if you can expand on that requirement. And the reason why I'm asking is in some of the FSPs, you'll find that a key individual does not necessarily have direct oversight, in a sense that the FAIS reps are not directly reporting to the key individuals, right? You'll find there's QA team, there's a team leader, or there's a direct line manager who's overseeing the activities of FAIS. And then above the line manager, there's a key individual who's looking after the entire business unit from a KI perspective. Now, when it comes to key individual having direct oversight over the execution of sales, can you at least expand on that so that there's clear direction as to what is the requirement?
Perfect. Let me just go back there. So the two sections that deals with execution of sales in fit and proper, so it's Board Notice 194 of 2017, is Section 13, which is on the slide, and then it also refers to Section 22B. So Section 22B, in brackets Roman numeral 2, then again in brackets, lowercase a, uppercase b, says the execution of sales is performed under the direct oversight of a key individual. So the person overseeing those execution of sales representatives must be a key individual. So, so this is very clear. So the legislation here is not ambiguous. It says under the direct oversight of a key individual. So the structure that you explained is not the direct oversight by the key individual. It's a removed oversight by the key individual because you've got another layer in between the representatives and the key individual.
Yeah, no, I understand that part. The challenge is that in the industry, you'll find that there's probably the team leaders are not necessarily qualifying as key individuals, right? And you would have key individuals who have that executive role in the business or in the BU to take those decisions, key individual related decisions, executive decisions. So unfortunately, in the industry, you find that some duties, although the key individual has a role to play, some duties are delegated to direct line managers or QA team to review all calls. As an example, if it's a telephone sales environment, there's a QA team that will review all those calls.
Yeah.
So in that instance, can the key individual rely on the work of the QA team to exercise the direct oversight, because probably they are at a managerial level?
The legislation doesn't allow for it. So you would need to go and look, because direct oversight is not defined in the legislation. So you need to go and look at the dictionary definition of direct oversight. And direct oversight means I need to look at this. I can't put a layer in between us. So I understand what you're explaining to me, but that is in contravention of that section in the legislation. So if that is how a business wants to set up their operational structures, they would need to apply for an exemption to then implement the structure that you've explained.
Okay, thank you.
Charene.
Fortune.
Yes, I'm back. Yeah, I think I was struggling to unmute. Just to add on discussion now relating to the execution of sales. They must just bear in mind that key individuals cannot delegate its responsibilities to anyone. So whether the QA is reviewing the calls or listening to the calls or reviewing the documents, no. Key individual cannot delegate. So the key individuals are responsible for all these representatives that are performing the execution of sales. They cannot delegate. Whether they've appointed a supervisor, it's their operations. Maybe it's their way of making things easier for the key individuals. So if, let's say, yeah, the FSP has got 100 representatives that are doing the execution of sales, when perhaps we do our inspection, we might or we will request the FSP to provide us with some controls that they have in place. And we have queried a lot of FSP before regarding this, and yeah, they'll have to prove to us that the key individual is able to oversee or perform a direct oversight as it is required by the law. Thank you.
So thank you very much. So that's a very good question. I'm glad that it was asked because I think that the structure that you described is the structure that we find in many FSPs. But when you are making use of the relaxation of the requirements by appointing people for execution of sales only, there is a stricter obligation. The more stringent obligation lies on the key individual. So the FSP must understand that we have relaxed requirements on the one hand for the representatives, but we have heightened requirements on the other hand for the key individuals in that scenario. So FSPs must also decide to what extent can they cope in terms of their structures with that. And if an FSP feels strongly that their structures are sound, then apply for an exemption. We've had a very active chat function. I again want to thank all of our colleagues who so diligently looked at all the chats and helped with that. All of our colleagues who helped with running the admin for this so smoothly. And to our presenters, thank you so much. Then to all of our guests today who attended, we had more than 500 of you. We're really pleased to see such great enthusiasm and interest in this. As I said before, we are going to be placing the recording plus the link to the assessment and the PowerPoint slides we will also make available. And give us about 2 weeks. It does take a little bit of admin time to just make sure that all of this is set up after the webinar has taken place. And then we will send you a communication with the links so that you can access this. And it will remain active and active for CPD purposes for 12 months. So thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it and have a really good day for the rest of the day.